To be young and in love. Poems and epics and movies and songs have been written and made to celebrate falling in love. Love is blind, they say. But there's one thing that those beautiful stories don't talk about. It is how to manage money. At what point do you have the money talk? Should you ask how much your partner earns? Should you speak about whether they have loans outstanding? Should you know how much they spend on their credit card? And should you invest separately or together? This is Big Decisions, and we're going to try and get you all of those questions answered on today's episode. But first, have you heard of the shoe game? We've tweaked it a little. Take a look.
I'm Akil, and this is my wife Malvika. We've been married for 5 years now.
So my name is Shraddha Agarwal. My husband's name is Aman Harlalka, and we've been married for 3 years now.
So I'm Aryan Pugalia.
And hi, I'm Jaya Potra Pugalia. We've been married for 2.5 years now.
This is Aman Singh. So I've been married for 1.5 years with Komal Nedkar.
This is Akash.
Hi, this is Kirtan
And we've been married for about 1.5 years now.
I think so.
Me, that was definitely me.
I did.
It's split. Yeah.
It's usually her, but finances are, we have joint finances, so.
So what we do is right at the beginning of the month, we have everything chalked out and segregated into different accounts.
In terms of spending, we plan on one trip abroad a year, not more than that.
We do have a certain goal for the whole year, that this is the particular amount that will go into savings, and this is the particular amount that will go in the fixed deposits, or you can say mutual funds or something like that.
All right, so that'll give you a flavor of some of what we're going to talk about today. And joining me on this conversation is Kirtan Shah, Managing Director, Credence Family Office. Kirtan, thanks so much for joining me.
Alex, thank you so much for having me on the show.
So, first question on a lighter note, who picks up the tab?
Alex, I think if it's the tub or the tab, it's always my wife.
So, this is an interesting question because it can be a political question in all fairness, right? Because I think the old world has changed. People are thinking very differently now. And let's face it, a lot of couples meet outside of formal settings, right? So it's an important question to ask when they get into a relationship. At what point, in your opinion, should the money conversation start happening?
I think, Alex, that's a very interesting question because money in that sense is a big taboo. In general, relationships where you've kind of not met by yourself, but you are arranged to meet. But I think that taboo has to be kept aside because you really want to get the conversation around money to be as quick as possible in your relationships, because at the end of the day, apart from all the emotional feelings that you might have, at some point in time practicality kicks in, and you really want to be in a space where both of you all are very comfortable when it comes to money. I think so it has to be as early as possible that you really can.
So if there is a courting period, then even during the courting period before you tie the knot is ideal in your opinion?
100%. I mean, look, while you are trying to get into a relationship with somebody, you really want to know how much that person really earns, because you might follow a lifestyle and you really want to be sure whether you can continue or not continue, either ways, right? You don't want to be in a situation where probably you're getting into a relationship without knowing how much debt does the other person really have, or the lifestyle that the other person lives. Can he or her himself manage that, or can he or herself be a helping hand in managing the lifestyle that the other person lives? I think these are very crucial conversations that you really want to have before you tie the knots, because this actually ends up becoming a pain point over a period of time.
That can, be, in fact, be a pain point, yes. And it's tough to manage things once you've discovered it, sometimes too late, right? When it comes to spending, let's first talk about spending and then let's talk about investing, because I think these are completely different ball games, right? So when it comes to spending, oftentimes people find out a little too late that the approach to spending is completely different. How do you reconcile that? Because there are definitely going to be situations where one is more conservative than the other, and one says, hey, you know what, why are we earning? We have to spend.
I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, if I look at my own example, I am that somebody who thinks that why are we spending so much of time and earning while I cannot buy what I really want to buy, and my wife is exactly opposite, and she's extremely calculative and will look at the label before she buys something. So you don't want to be in a spot too deep in the relationship to figure out that you all think so differently from each other. I think the best way to do this is follow the old mantra. First, try and understand assets and liabilities on both sides. Try and understand income and expenses on both sides, right? And follow the basic mantra of first figuring out your goals, and basis your goals, how much do you really have to save every month? And once you figured that out of the 100 rupees, I might not be able to go beyond 60, 70 in terms of saving, then you know that you have the remaining 30, 40 to spend. The biggest problem very early in the relationship is that when you are very new, you know, the first thing that really takes off is the lifestyle.
Right.
You all want to go out, entertainment, travel. And in that bit, you don't really keep a budget in mind, right? And when you've not kept a budget in mind, everything else takes a backseat.
Right.
So I think go the very basic funda. Try and figure out if you make 100, how much is sacrosanct for you to save for all your goals.
Interesting. So you're saying before you even start thinking about how to spend, you think of how to save together?
100%. See, because you know, traditionally, because we are talking about India, I think the biggest problem or the biggest advantage, whichever way a couple would really want to take this, is that most people want to buy a house once they've got married, and that's a very big decision. Right now, if you want to buy a house, you don't want to end up being wrong on the credit rating side of your personal finance, because that will make your loans very difficult. You also don't want to be in a situation where the EMIs are so high that it cannot afford the lifestyle that you are living. So there are so many of these decisions that you really want to be sure of. First, budget it in a way that over 2 years, 3 years in the relationship, you don't figure out that, you know, this is not going the way that you really wanted it to.
Okay, so then let's talk about that investment angle, and then eventually we'll talk about spending, and I have a few ideas that I want to bounce off you. When it comes to investing, there are some very strong points that are made by advisors like yourself to say that individuals should save separately. If they're doing mutual fund investments, for example, they should have their own SIPs running. Why is that? I mean, there's an obvious reason, but is that the only reason?
I think that's the only reason, at least in my opinion.
And maybe we should spell that out.
So look, while you are in a relationship, unfortunately, sometimes things may go wrong, and you know, you might have to part ways over a period of time. So you don't want to really complicate it to try and understand who contributed how much and whose share is how much. And I might be called out for saying this, but Indian laws are slightly more tilted towards the lady, and that might end up surprising the male in the house when things start going south. Right? That's a big reason why people don't kind of come together and invest. But I think that's a big commitment that you're making to each other, that this is a holding point where even if things start going wrong, you want to take a pause. You're not in a casual relationship, and use this as a bait to, kind of help things come back.
So, Kirtan, the reason why I've been kind of prodding you on this is because I want to know if I'm doing something wrong. Because for the longest time, the most convenient thing for me to do is to have a joint account with my wife. We both put a certain percentage of the same percentage of our salary, despite the fact that there's a disparity in how much we earn. We each put a percentage, and the investments go from there.
There's absolutely nothing wrong in doing that. I am a proponent of wanting to do that, very honestly. So apart from the two things that I spoke to you of in the last question, I think one more reason maybe because individually each one of you might want to claim the ATC, ATD kind of deductions, and that might benefit you. But all of these things put together, I don't still see a reason why you would not want to do it in a joint account. But that's the easiest way to do, not just for income but for expense also. I'll be very happy to hear if at all you have a similar account where both of you are putting in X amount equally, from which the household expenses are taken care of.
But that's complicated. That's complicated. I think that's complicated because, while there are certain aspects that are fixed, Kirtan, there are also miscellaneous expenses that take place, right?
Yes.
So would you say that utilities, therefore, and I asked this question, who pays the utilities? Invariably, it is, I paid this bill this month, maybe next month you should get it. But there's an easier way to do it, is there?
No, I think, see, there are either two ways. Either you separate what each one of you would do.
You take responsibility
You
for
take
it.
responsibilities, or you would rather say that, why complicate things? Exactly like the way we are doing investments. Let's put an X amount equally in a particular fund. Try and make sure that that's the maximum that we really want to spend in the entire month, right? So you also know that you've budgeted. You're not going over budget. And if at all you end up saving, right, that saving can accumulate, and you have that amount of money that you've kept aside for spending literally, right?
So here's the thing that is so beautiful about that kind of an approach, Kirtan, at least from my perspective, and hopefully people will find this useful. Correct me if I'm wrong. Whatever is left in my account after I have transferred all of that money out for the expenses as well as for the investments, I can do whatever I want with it.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of budgeting, right? Is because you have clarity on everything. You have clarity on how much do you really want to spend maximum, how much would you really have the ability to save every month, and then you also have that leeway of some more money if at all you want to do something which is not budgeted or planned for, right? So I think which is why it's easier that you have these things sorted out, and then the life is pretty smooth when it comes to financials. And that does not become an hindrance in the ecosystem that you are trying to build in a marriage.
All right. So, Kirtan, we've spoken about some aspects of investing either together or separately. And, at the very least, I hope that this has gotten people talking, or it will get people talking. When it comes to spending, obviously, we've spoken about buying a house, and we will speak about it in more detail. But I think more important than that is the decision to have a child and how to manage the investments / expenses for that child. Do you have a conversation about finances before you make that decision?
I think it's extremely important for you to have a conversation before you do the child planning, is because child planning is an extremely expensive affair, right? I'm sure you and I both will relate to how much did we really spend in schooling versus how much is the cost of the schooling today. In fact, if I'm not wrong, education expense every year is increasing at double-digit inflation. And what also happens is when you talk about education planning, you probably might be able to, slowly, steadily save for graduation or post-graduation. But what do you do for schooling? Because schooling expense would immediately start, and that expense
3-4 years.
Yeah, and that expense is huge every year. So would you really have the kind of cash flows to take care of the kind of schooling ambition that you really have for your child? So I think this is definitely a conversation worth having. But I think, look, there are two ways of looking at it, right? There is a practical thought process, there is an emotional thought process. Practically, you want to make sure that you have the kind of resources before you bring a new life for us, right? And the other way of really looking at it is slightly more emotional, where you say that I would need a helping hand when I am aging, And if you can maintain a balance between the both, I think that's the right approach to move forward. But definitely child expenses are big, and you should be okay if at all you don't really have the cash flow to compromise on your standard of living, or otherwise compromise on what
because a very
you want.
strong argument that will be made by my parents' generation at the very least is that, look, when you were growing up, it's not like we had things handed to us. We had to work really hard, and we struggled a little bit, and that ultimately sometimes is the answer.
No, that in fact is always the answer when you talk to parents, right? But I think unfortunately generation and the ecosystem has evolved. The millennials don't really think that way, right? Because when you go back to talk to our parents, they didn't really think of real estate the way you and I think. They thought it was extremely necessity or a necessary investment to do to have a house for yourself. Today, today people like you and me want to stay on rent because we have a lifestyle to maintain, and because we probably feel that we understand the math and why investing is better than buying a house. It's very similar to that, right? So I think there is a lot of westernization that we as Indians are adapting to. But the biggest challenge is when we are trying to adapt to the Western culture, we forget that the social security is taken care of in the Western world when you retire, which is not the case in India.
I would also like to talk to Kirtan about DINK, that is double income, no kids, which is becoming quite popular nowadays. People don't want to rush into a decision, and so for a while at least they are double income, no kids. Should you take advantage of that in your opinion? Should you go out and spend the money that you're working so hard to earn?
I think, Alex, there are 2-3 points that I'll really like to make here. First, because of the way the lifestyle and the income has really gone up, there is definitely a spending angle that comes into picture while you are thinking of the DINK angle. But if you end up spending and not saving, right, you're going to find it equally difficult when you really have to start spending for the kid. One. Right? But I am surely of the thought process where I feel that while you are spending so much of time and energy to earn, you don't really want to compromise thinking of what will I do 20 years later if I don't have the money. So I think maintaining a fine balance is extremely important. I would really not suggest that you go out and save everything and not live your life. I'm somebody who believes that you should live your life, but be a little more prudent, and if you've planned something in advance, you will have more clarity of how do you really want to spend and enjoy life at the same time.
So we broached the topic on a few occasions before the break, and we spoke about the importance of buying a house in certain situations. And I'm glad that we brought up DINK just before that, right? Because it gains significance if you are, of course, if you have a child or if you have children, then buying a house gains that much more of an important aspect because you're handing something over. If you are DINK, should you contemplate whether or not to buy a house in the first place?
I think this is also very emotional, Alex, because if you are very practical, you would rather think that, let me stay on rent. It's just 2-3% rent yield. I might as well, kind of invest the rest of the money and enjoy my lifestyle, right? But if you are more emotional in terms of your thought process, then irrespective of whatever math that you talk about, you would still want to buy a house as soon as possible because that's what you've inherited as a thought process and you continue to live that. So I think it is more interpersonal whether you are more practical in your approach or more emotional in your approach. And I would really like to believe that nothing is wrong, right? Because the earlier you buy the house, I've also seen cases where, you've kind of locked yourself into keeping that X amount of money aside, which does not give you the liberty to do anything that can actually go wrong also, right? So it might hurt your lifestyle to a certain extent, but I've seen a lot of people really benefit by locking a large proportion of what they are making
Forces
towards
you to
buying.
be disciplined.
Absolutely. So there is a good and bad in both. I think it is more, like I said, more interpersonal of whether you are more practical or emotional.
Okay, now protection in terms of contingency fund and all of these aspects, we kind of done conversations on this, both on the channel as well as on this program. But I think insurance is an important conversation to have, right? When you are thinking about how a couple should approach this. Health and life both. What should you bear in mind here?
Oh, 100%. I think I have always in all of my conversations said that investing is something that you do the third.
Right.
The first thing that you do is have a health insurance. Unfortunately, a lot of working couples feel that they are covered by their corporate insurance.
Right.
But there are hundreds of problems of not having a personal insurance. So please have a medical or a health insurance separately outside of your corporate insurance. The second thing is for you to do is to have a term insurance. So if both of you all are working, you might as well have a term insurance for both, because your current lifestyle is actually a combination of both of you earning and not one of you earning.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is where you start investing. So for me, investing comes third. First is health insurance, second is term insurance, and then investing.
Okay. Now, in terms of debt that you have, I think a lot of people are comfortable with the idea of having either credit card debt or even long-term debt. But what are the thumb rules to follow when it comes to sharing this one with your partner? There needs to be transparency. But are there thumb rules in terms of how much of your joint income should go towards paying off debt?
So there are two things. I am somebody who believes that good debt is very good. I mean, you should have good debt. Because if you adjust for taxes, let's say if you're getting a home loan at 8.5, and if you've taken a loan in joint account and both of you all are able to take advantage of interest and principal repayment, you might end up paying only 6.5% practically. Now, where do you really get to borrow at 6.5 and make 12% in the market, right? So I am somebody who believes that good debt is very good, and you should definitely go ahead and have good debt. I am somebody who's completely against having a credit card debt or a personal loan kind of a product. So I follow the 30-30-40 rule very strongly. I am somebody who believes that if you have 100 rupees as income, try and make sure that you have all your living expenses, lifestyle expenses managed in 30 rupees. Maximum 30 rupees goes towards your EMIs. That's your house, car, whatever. And then the remaining 40 rupees gets invested. I mean, there is a very basic calculation where if 40 rupees is getting invested and you make 12%, probably in 180 months, you will be financially independent.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that you will retire, but I'm saying you will have enough corpus that will take care of your living expenses, and then you can continue to do whatever you really want to.
And that's something to aspire for, right? Individually or together as a couple, because then you can choose to live your life as you'd like to, on your terms.
Oh, 100%. But just to clarify, I'm not saying that you will retire after 180 months, but you will be comfortable in a way that even if you don't have a job, you have enough corpus to take care of your lifestyle plus your living expenses till you find a new one. I think that's emotionally very appealing.
Thanks, Kirtan, for joining us on Big Decisions.
Thank you so much, Alex, for having me on the show.
And thank you for listening and viewing this conversation. Let us know what you think in the comment section on any one of our social media platforms, and do stay tuned for a lot more. This is NDTV Profit.